All right. Do you ever wish you could turn back time? Do you ever daydream about changing something you said or did in your past? Do you live with the regret of something you did in your past or maybe didn't do? Do you ever wonder what life would be like if you had done something different in your youth? What if you would have finished school? What if you hadn't got married? What if you had put off having children? What if you had lost that job? What if you had gotten that promotion? What if you had something? What if you hadn't said? What if you'd said something, or what if you hadn't said something? What would life be like if you had gotten that Game Boy, that cell phone, those new clothes, that shiny purse? You know what I'm saying. What if? What if? What if? What if you knew then what you know now? Is there a way to know the future? Is there at least a way to have a general idea about the future? The name of today's message is When Foresight Becomes 2020. All right. So please stand and cover yourselves for the reading of our scripture. And for those of you who don't know, I am tethered, so I will not be able to stand. It is not a command of God. It is a tradition that we love because the Lord and all of his Talmudim did it, so we like to do whatever they did. All right, so today's verse comes from Habakkuk, which is known to the Christian world as Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 4. They read, Hine upela lo yashra nafsho bo ve zedik be'emunato yich yeh. All right, you may be seated. So our first word is hine. It means behold, lo. But hine is a special word, though. It's not just your basic everyday behold. Think about this. It's the idea you're trying to get somebody's attention on something specific. So you point at something specific and say, hey, look at this thing here, this cup, this door, this car, this dog, whatever it is, you're getting people's attention on something particular. That's what hine is really all about. Our next word is upala, which is lifted up. It's to swell up, to be swollen, inflated, to have a hernia. Your hernia is lifted up, it's swollen, it's inflated, right? But you get the idea. So it's often used of pride and things like that because you're lifted up in yourself, either what you think of yourself beyond maybe what you ought to, and that kind of stuff. But really not the word so much used in that way, but it most certainly can and is used in that way from time to time. The next word is lo, which is not or no. It's the negative article. So whatever they attach that to will become negative. Then it says yashra, which is upright. It's to be straight, especially of a way or a path. And what they mean by that is the way you live your life. Is the way you live your life straight? Is it upright? You follow? It's to be even or level. Metaphorically, it's used of an even mind, to be tranquil, to be composed. It is the opposite of to be inflated, to be proud or puffed up, the opposite of that, which in this case, that's what they're talking about, because remember, they connected the low, the negative, to this. So it's not of a straight path. It's not of a right way of living. It's not being tranquil in the mind and not being composed. It is to be inflated, puffed up, and that kind of stuff. Now, I like to make a note here. The biblical Hebrews ascribe to a just man, a man who lives according to the laws contained within the Torah. That's what they called a just man. They ascribe to a person like that benignity, liberality, temperance, sobriety in eating and in speaking, the love of truth, the love of wisdom, emphatically used of innocence from Torah rebellion, which is called sin. Here's another note I wanted to add. The biblical text only refers to Torah observance as righteousness, as a just person. All others are unrighteous, unjust. If you're not according to the Torah, you're not right. You're not righteous. You're not just. It is based specifically in the biblical world, in the Bible, as somebody who is Torah observant. It's very important. So then it says nafsho. It's from nafash, which is the soul. So it's his soul. Literally, it's soul he, but it's his soul. That's and they say it's breath, and it's the breath of life. It's to exhale, but it's the anima by which the body lives. It's the part of you that lives on after you die. That's your soul, and so that's the word that's being used here. Then it's bow, but this is not bow as in come over here. It's bow as in it's just two Hebrew letters put together, and so it's a sound-alike word. It's in here, in him, so the soul in him. Then it says ve zadik, and so that's and just. It's to be just. It's to be righteous. It's used of a judge or a king who maintains the right and dispenses justice. And remember, this is the biblical world. So it maintains the right and dispenses justice according to the Torah. You really need to keep that in mind. That is largely lost in the Western world today because they've forgotten that that even the Christian Bible, from cover to cover, every last letter in that book was written by a Jewish rabbi. Yes, a Jewish rabbi. And one of them was a female, by the way. If you've ever read the Songs of Solomon, you realize that a female wrote part of that, right? You can't dispute that. So there were female rabbis in the Bible. Lots of them, by the way. What's that girl's name that wrote that doctorate degree on that? I have that book here. Yeah, right here. Bernadette Bruton, Brooten, women leaders in the ancient synagogue. She went into the actual catacombs and took pictures and categorized and all the kinds of eyes and put this thing together. This is her doctorate dissertation from Harvard, I believe. Very, very well put together, very good read. If you want to see that women really were in leadership and that God did not have a problem with leadership among the Jews and among the biblical people in the Bible, this is a great read. It's not a bad read, honestly. So anyway, she proved that there were lots of Jewish rabbim in the time of the Bible, particularly Jewish women rabbis, female rabbis, lots of them, and she proves it. Okay, so I forgot why I got off on that, but they're talking about somebody who is righteous that was only ascribed to somebody who lived according to the Torah. And when they talked about kings dispensing justice and righteousness and things like that, it was talking about kings who specifically judged according to the Torah. Never any other way was it used. It was one who had a just cause, something that was according to the Torah, one who speaks what is right and true, speaks according to the Torah, speaks of the Torah, speaks about the Torah, teaches the Torah. It's of a private person who is just toward other men, according to the Torah, again, obedient to God's Torah, hence upright, honest, and virtuous. Again, the uprightness, the virtue, the honesty is based on what the Torah calls right and wrong. All right. It is from the root zadak, which is to be right or straight, again, according to the Torah, It's of a straight way or path, a way of life. That's when they say a straight way or a straight path. They're talking about the way someone lives their life. Property, it's property. Properly, it is to be stiff and rigid. In other words, they compare it to a lance, a straight. We would say straight as an arrow, but back in the day, they would say straight as a lance. It's to be true and sincere, to be right, suitable, to be just and righteous. Use of God, it's use of the Torah. Uh, it's of those who have a just cause. It's going to sound pretty much like the other one because it's where the other word came from. So our next word is be'emunato, which of course is in faithfulness. It's emunah, faithfulness, which is of course from Aman. But faithfulness, it's a firmness of security, of faithfulness in fulfilling promises. And specifically, we're going to be talking about promises according to the Torah. It's from the root, as I said, Aman, which is to prop up, to stay, to sustain, to support. The faithfulness of learning and living by the Torah is what props people up. It's what sustains them. It's what supports them. It's to support with the arm is the way it's compared. So knowing the Torah and living by the Torah is like being supported by the arms. If you're new at it and like young in it, it'd be like God holding you in his arms. The Torah is like God holding you in your arms, in his arms, when you're new to it. When you've learned it and you live by it, it's like God holding his spouse in his arms. So it changes from, but it's always God holding us in his arms, not a bad place to be. All right. So they compare it then to a child being carried in a mother's arms. And we need to see it as of the parent who guides and brings up and sustains and nourishes and founds and builds up that child. That's what the Torah does. That is how God raises his children, by them learning and living the Torah. It's to be stayed up, hence to be firm, unshaken. If you know where you stand with God, if you know what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, and how it's done, and all of that, you are solidly founded, right? So you're unshakable. Something that you can totally lean on. You know that the Torah says you cannot steal. You can lean on that. You know that it's like a pillar that will not fall over when you lean against it. You know that that's solid, that it's a foundation, that it's strong, and it won't fall over on you. Metaphorically, it's to be faithful. To be faithful is to lean and confide on anyone, to trust, to be secure. So your trust in the way you live your life and how you conduct your way of life is completely founded on the Torah because you know it's something you can trust. You know that it will always be right in every situation. It will never be wrong. So faithfulness was generally, this is a note I added, it's a note that I added to my version of the Jacinius, I believe. The new one, the one you guys don't have yet. Faithfulness was generally only spoken with respect to Torah observance. In other words, of being faithful to live out the Torah in our day-to-day lives. The word used in this way was no doubt chosen because the Yehudim, the Jews, believed that Torah was the foundation of life. It sustains and supports those who live according to it. All right, so then I believe our last word. Yeah, our last word is yih. It's life. It's to live. It's the original idea this word is that of breathing, in as much as the breath animates life, but it's to continue safe, to continue to safe and sound. It's to live. It's to revive. That's why they say breathing, big breath of air revives you, makes you feel good, to recover of health, to be healed even. So it's to really have life. Okay, so here's my amplified translation. Remember, it's Habakkuk or Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4. It says, Behold, a lifted up, swollen, and inflated soul is not upright, straight, even, level, tranquil, composed, Torah observant, wise, sin free, or righteous. It is not in a person. But the just, the righteous, the true, the Torah observant, who are honest, virtuous, pious, temperate, sober, wise, sin free, right, straight, true, sincere. They are alive. They live out their life in firmness and security, sustained, supported, nourished, unshakable, and founded by faithfulness in Torah observance. Okay, so here's my more straightforward translation. Behold, a lifted up soul is not Torah observant in a person, but the Torah observant live out their lives by Torah observance. Thank you, Captain Obvious. That's really what it said. The Torah observant live by Torah observance. It's about as obvious as it can be, right? If you want to call yourself righteous, then you have to live by righteousness. That's in biblical terms, that's if you are righteous and you're Torah observant because you live according to the Torah. All right. If this verse sounds familiar, it should to the Christians because it's in the second letter of Rabbani. Of course, the Christians know that as Corinthians. It's in chapter 5, verse 7, because it's a direct quote. So now I would like to turn your attention to this completely imaginary, historically revised, but somewhat accurate true story. Maybe I should run that by you one more time. I want to turn your attention to this completely imaginary, historically revised, but somewhat accurate true story. 3 Jewish children were talking about their prayers and aspirations for their lives one day. The first child's name was Yosef, and he said, I want to be a great king and rule over the people and be wise and respected by everyone. The second child's name was Miriam, and she said, I want to be the mommy of a great king and live in a palace and be surrounded by a big family. The third child's name was Kepa, and he said, I just want to be a fisherman. Well, first, Joseph's his dreams of grandeur, they caused so much trouble that he was actually sold into slavery by his own brothers. He worked hard and was kind to others and always did the right thing. Even so, he was eventually convicted and thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. Second, Miriam, when she grew up, she married a carpenter. Well, they were very poor and lived in a very small house, but had a big family, and they were happy. Her life was filled with tragedy, though, because her husband died young, and her oldest son was arrested and eventually put to death for a crime he didn't commit. Now, the third, that was Kepa, he became a fisherman, but he was given the opportunity of a lifetime to follow a great leader, a leader who would change the world for the good, but his leader was murdered. Oh, the disappointment. Oh, the lost dreams. Okay, back to the Hebrew children. Joseph had a dream, you see, that he would one day rule over his brothers and parents. But that dream caused his brothers to sell him into slavery. Boy, they didn't like that at all. He rose from the bottom of the pit, literally of the pit, and worked himself all the way to the top of Potiphar's household, only to be falsely accused and thrown into jail. Then he became the man in charge in the jail, but he was still in jail. And even after he accurately interpreted a man's dream, he was left there to rot. Oh, the feelings of abandonment Joseph must have felt. Oh, the despair. He had done nothing wrong. He did everything honorably and honestly, and look how God repaid him. Miriam was told by an angel that she would give birth to the Mashiach, but the people in her town talked about her behind her back, and she knew it. At times it was exciting to be the mother of the Mashiach, when he healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, caused the deaf to hear, and he raised the dead, walked on water, the simple stuff Mashiach does. How her heart must have sunk when she watched him die. How she must have doubted everything. What depths of despair she must have felt. Capa just wanted to be a fisherman. He didn't have any lofty dreams or goals, but then a man came along and filled his head with crazy ideas about changing the world and triumphing over evil and saving Israel from sin. Ideas about God's kingdom coming to and ruling over the earth. And then he watched that man die. If that wasn't bad enough, after they killed Capa's leader, he had to run for his life and lie about even knowing the man. Someone he deeply cared about, his very best friend in the world. Then, just 3 days later, that little girl who wanted to be a mommy of a great king watched the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords walk through a wall. And she knew she would spend all eternity in his palace, just like she wanted when she was a little girl. And that same moment, that fisherman finally understood what Yeshua meant when he told him that he would be a fisher of men. Capa spent the rest of his life as a fisher of men, and right to his last breath, he was declaring Yeshua HaMashiach Adonai. Yeshua the Messiah is our Lord. So how does hindsight become 2020? We realize that what God has shown us is only a small glimpse of what is actually going to happen. Joseph never became a great king, but he did run the known world for the king. Not only did he live to see his brothers and parents actually bow to him, he lived to see the day that everyone in the known world bowed to him. God only let Joseph in on a very small piece of the story. Joseph only saw his brothers and parents bowing to him. It wasn't until late in his life that he realized that God had turned every tragic event in his life into a step towards something beyond his wildest dreams coming true. You see, every bad thing that happens to those who follow God's law becomes something that helps us be more than we ever dreamed we could be. Now, if you will indulge me a little further, please let me read to you and comment on my translation of the 13th chapter of the second scroll to the Ravani, the Corinthians. So here we go. This is my translation of the Greek. I don't take anyone else's. I do it myself. Verse 1. Though I speak the languages of men and of Malahim. That just means messengers, but it's inferred that it's messengers of heaven, which is why in the old days they began to call them angels. And then, of course, that blossomed into fat little babies with wings flying around shooting arrows. It's nothing like that. But anyway, let's think of it as angels. It'll help you understand it better. Though I speak the languages of men and of angels and have no love, I have become noisy brass and clanking pan lids. I mean cymbals. And though I have prophesied and understood all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have the persistence to move mountains and have no love, I am nothing. And though I give away all my possessions, and though I give my body to be burned and have no love, it profits me nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not envious. It is not a bragger, nor is it arrogant. It does not behave improperly. It is not self-indulgent. It does not calculate evil. It does not rejoice in non-Torah observance, but rejoices in Torah observance, the truth. It endures all things. It is always Torah observant. It is always hopeful. It is always steady. Love never fails. And whether there be prophecies, they will pass away. And whether there be languages, they will fail. And whether there be knowledge, it will cease. For we know in part. Listen carefully. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. And when completion in our knowledge and obedience to the Torah when perfection comes. That's what when they say perfection or completion in the Bible, they are talking about the day when we know the Torah completely and well enough to live by it. In that day, when that day comes, that which is in part ceases. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when we are full in our knowledge of Torah, in part ceases. In part ceases. Knowing in part stops. Prophesying in part stops. It's right there in the New Testament. Verse 11. When I was learning the Torah, when I was a child, I spoke as someone learning the Torah. I spoke as a child. I understood as someone learning the Torah. I understood as a child. I reasoned as someone learning the Torah. I reasoned as a child. But when I became Torah observant, when I became an adult, I ceased from non-Torah observance. I ceased from the childish. For now we see through a darkened mirror, and then completion in our knowledge and obedience to Torah. Our perfection, in this particular verse, he called it face to face. It's really important that we catch this. For now, he's talking about the people, not himself. For now, we see, he's being generous here, but he's talking to those people, not himself. For now we see through a darkened mirror, and then face to face. So face to face with God happens when we fully understand and live by the Torah. Now I know in part, and I will know as I am known. Now I know in part. Remember, when you get to the completion, there's no more part. It ceases. So he's speaking again to the people, not to himself. It's difficult to translate this to where it makes total sense in English without really playing with it. And I don't like doing that, so I'm just going to have to explain to you. He's not put himself in this category just because it says I. Now I know in part. If I don't know the Torah fully, I know in part. And I will know as I am known. Before we know the Torah, fully know it, God knows us, but we do not know him. Here we are being promised that if we learn the Torah, we will know God the way he knows us. And keep in mind, though, that it is still limited to the ability that we have with our pea brain compared to God's gigantic brain. You know what I'm saying? Still, we should walk away from this knowing that we will know God as well as man can know God once we learn the Torah. Shaul is not talking about what happens after death. He is speaking about something that should happen during our lifetime. Verse 13, and now abides Torah observance. Faithfulness, that's Torah observance. And now abides Torah observance. Faithfulness. Hope, love. And the greatest of these is love. So, how can love be better than Torah observance? Well, God said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Love is truly the greatest of these. Because if we can have the love for God, then, and probably only then, will we truly keep his commandments. So let me ask it again, how does foresight become 2020? It happens when we learn to trust in God at all times in all things, instead of fighting him every step of the way, instead of griping and complaining every step of the way, instead of questioning God every time something goes wrong, instead of blaming God every time something goes wrong, instead of making suggestions to God about the things he could do or, that would make it better. Just go with it. Trust God no matter what you see. Live by your conviction that God is in control. Absolute trust in God is knowing that no matter what your situation is, he is in control. God didn't give you your dreams so that you would be crushed by them when they failed. He gave you a dream to give you just a glimpse of what is to come. Open your eyes, prick up your ears, understand with your whole heart. Does it sound familiar? Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. The best is yet to come, folks. Shalom, beshalom.